My name is Kenzie, and I just turned 38. I should have been happy, surrounded by family at my birthday dinner, but instead, I felt an overwhelming wave of suffocating pressure. Something inside me finally exploded after years of feeling like an outsider in my own family. This is my story, and if you've ever felt like you just don't fit in, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. The Millers were a typical suburban family, or at least they tried to appear that way. We lived in a charming two-story house in a tree-lined neighborhood in Boise, Idaho. My dad, Robert, was an accountant, steady and reserved. My mom, Susan, was a homemaker, always meticulously dressed, always concerned with appearances. Then there were my two older brothers, Mark and David, both married with children. Mark had two rambunctious boys, and David had a sweet little girl. I was the youngest, the only daughter, and the anomaly. Family gatherings were loud, chaotic, and filled with the kind of loving banter that somehow always excluded me. I was the quiet one, the bookish one, the one who preferred long walks to family barbecues. Our parents always pushed for conformity, for us to follow a prescribed path: marriage, kids, a stable career. My brothers embraced it, but I always felt a different pull. The major shift happened when I decided not to pursue a conventional career path after college, instead choosing to work remotely as a freelance graphic designer, giving me the freedom to travel. That's when the subtle remarks started, the "when are you going to settle down?" questions disguised as concern. It was a slow drip of judgment, eroding my sense of belonging until, at my 38th birthday dinner, it all came crashing down. If you've ever been told you don't fit, this is for you. I can still picture the scene, clear as day. The clinking of silverware against porcelain, the muffled chatter, the sickly sweet scent of my birthday cake wafting from the kitchen. We were at our usual Italian restaurant, the one my mom loved because it was respectable. My brothers, their wives, and their kids were all there, a bustling, self-contained unit. I sat at the end of the table, a polite smile plastered on my face, feeling utterly invisible. Mark was regaling everyone with a story about his oldest son's soccer game, while David's daughter, Lily, was drawing on a napkin, oblivious to the adult conversation. My mom kept glancing at me, a worried frown creasing her perfectly smooth forehead. Every now and then, she'd try to pull me into a conversation, usually about some distant cousin who had just announced their engagement or another who was expecting their third child. Each anecdote was a subtle jab, a reminder of the life I wasn't living, the boxes I hadn't checked. Dad, as usual, was quiet, occasionally nodding along, lost in his own thoughts. The air grew heavy with unspoken expectations. It wasn't just the "when are you going to settle down?" questions, it was the way they looked at me, as if I were a puzzle piece from a different set, stubbornly refusing to fit into their carefully constructed picture. I'd spent my entire life trying to contort myself into their mold, to be the daughter they wanted. I tried to enjoy family vacations that felt like forced marches, attempted to feign interest in their mundane suburban dramas, even went on a few disastrous dates arranged by my well-meaning, but ultimately misguided mother. But deep down, I knew it was all a performance. The real me, the one who dreamt of faraway places and lived for the thrill of creating something new, was locked away, hidden beneath layers of politeness and forced smiles. That night, as I watched my family, their faces illuminated by the dim restaurant lights, a suffocating feeling enveloped me. It was the weight of their expectations pressing down on me, threatening to crush the last vestiges of who I truly was. The hum of the restaurant faded into a dull drone as the weight of all those years of unspoken feelings finally became too much to bear. The moment the cake arrived, adorned with 38 candles, my mom's voice cut through the background noise. "Make a wish, Kenzie. Maybe this year you'll finally find a nice young man and settle down." The words, though seemingly innocent, landed like a punch to the gut. All eyes were on me, expectant, almost pitying. I looked at my reflection in the window, a stranger staring back. Something inside me snapped. It wasn't a sudden explosion, but a quiet, almost imperceptible shift, like a fault line finally giving way. The polite smile I'd worn for hours evaporated, replaced by a steely resolve I hadn't known I possessed. I took a deep breath, the scent of vanilla and sugar filling my lungs. "You know what, Mom?" My voice was surprisingly steady, devoid of the usual tremor of anxiety. "I think I'm perfectly settled down." A hush fell over the table. My brothers exchanged bewildered glances. My mom's perfectly made-up face contorted into a mask of confusion, then hurt. "What do you mean, dear? You're almost 40, still single, no children. And what exactly is wrong with that?" I interrupted, my voice gaining strength. I have a career I love, one that allows me to travel the world and experience things you can only dream of. I have friends who understand me, who celebrate my choices, not question them. I'm happy, Mom. Truly happy. The words tumbled out, a torrent of long-suppressed emotions. It felt like I was shedding years of pretense, peeling back layers of a false self. My dad, usually so stoic, cleared his throat. Kenzie, don't be rude. Your mother just wants what's best for you. What's best for me is not living someone else's life, I retorted, turning to face him directly. What's best for me is being true to myself, even if that doesn't fit your family picture. The phrase, family picture, hung in the air, a stark representation of the ideal they held, one I clearly didn't belong in. My brothers, ever the peacekeepers, tried to intervene, mumbling about how everyone just wanted me to be happy. But their words were hollow, ringing with the same underlying judgment. I looked at their faces, these people who were supposed to be my closest allies, and saw only a reflection of the societal expectations they had so readily embraced. It was a devastating realization, but also strangely liberating. The anger, the frustration, the years of feeling like a disappointment, all coalesced into a fierce determination. I wasn't going to let their narrow definition of happiness define mine anymore. This wasn't just a birthday dinner, it was an awakening. The silent, bookish girl was gone, replaced by a woman who was finally ready to speak her truth. The cake, forgotten, sat in the center of the table, its flickering candles a testament to the years I had spent trying to blow out my own fire. The following days were a blur of raw emotion, a storm after the calm, as I wrestled with the fallout of that pivotal night. The birthday dinner ended abruptly after my outburst. My mom, tearful, excused herself from the table, and my dad followed, a stern look on his face. My brothers and their wives quickly paid the bill, avoiding my gaze, and ushered their children out. I was left sitting alone, amidst the half-eaten cake and scattered crumbs, a strange mix of exhilaration and crushing loneliness washing over me. The restaurant staff, sensing the tension, quietly began clearing tables around me. I didn't care. I felt a lightness I hadn't experienced in years, a profound sense of liberation that came from finally speaking my truth, even if it meant shattering the carefully constructed facade of family harmony. The next few weeks were predictably difficult. My phone buzzed constantly with texts from my mom, ranging from accusatory to guilt-inducing. How could you embarrass us like that? To, I just want you to be happy, but your choices worry me. My brothers, ever the pragmatic ones, tried to mediate, suggesting I apologize, that I mend fences. They didn't understand that there were no fences to mend, only walls that needed to come down. I ignored most of their calls and texts. I needed space, time to process what had happened and what it meant for my future. This wasn't just about a single argument. It was about a lifetime of feeling misunderstood, of having my desires and aspirations dismissed as frivolous or temporary. It was about the unspoken message that my life, as it was, wasn't enough. During this period of self-imposed exile, I started to really delve into the root of my discomfort. I pulled out old photo albums, tracing the progression of my life through the lens of family gatherings. There I was, a little girl, always on the periphery, a book clutched in my hand while my brothers wrestled in the backyard. There I was again, a teenager, observing conversations rather than participating in them, feeling the subtle sting of not being quite like the others. I realized that my perceived difference wasn't a flaw, but a fundamental part of who I was. I preferred solitude, valued intellectual pursuits, and harbored a fierce independence that chafed against the traditional expectations placed upon me. This deep dive into my past wasn't an act of self-pity, but one of self-discovery. It was about acknowledging that my desire for a different life wasn't a rebellion against my family, but an authentic expression of my own identity. I finally understood that their family picture wasn't a universal truth, but a specific narrative they had created for themselves, one that simply didn't have a place for someone like me, who chose a path less traveled, a life unburdened by societal norms and expectations. This realization was both painful and incredibly empowering. It was the moment I stopped trying to fit and started to accept my own unique shape. The journey of self-acceptance is a winding road, often paved with difficult conversations and unexpected detours. With the emotional dust settling, I began to actively seek out what truly resonated with me. My freelance graphic design work, which had always been a source of quiet satisfaction, now became my anchor. It connected me with people from all walks of life, individuals who embraced creativity and celebrated individuality. I started attending virtual workshops and online communities for remote workers and digital nomads. It was there, in these unconventional spaces, that I began to find my true tribe. One of the first people I connected with was a woman named Alex, a travel blogger in her early 40s who had spent the last decade living out of a backpack, documenting her adventures. We bonded over late-night video calls, discussing everything from the challenges of finding reliable Wi-Fi in remote villages to the liberating feeling of shedding societal expectations. Alex wasn't married, didn't have kids, and her life was a testament to the richness that could be found outside traditional constructs. She shared stories of her travels, her passions, and the incredible people she'd met along the way. Through her, I saw a reflection of the life I secretly yearned for, a life full of experiences rather than possessions, of personal growth rather than societal benchmarks. Then there was Ben, a software engineer who also worked remotely, and shared my love for hiking and nature photography. We started planning virtual hikes, where we'd share photos and stories from our respective trails, thousands of miles apart. With Ben, there was no pressure, no leading questions about my relationship status or future plans. He simply appreciated my company, my perspectives, and my shared passion for the outdoors. He understood my need for solitude and quiet reflection, seeing it not as a flaw, but as a strength. These connections, forged in shared interests and mutual respect, were a stark contrast to the dynamics within my own family. My new friends didn't try to fix me or fit me into a predefined mold. They saw me, truly saw me, for who I was and celebrated it. They didn't ask, "When are you going to settle down?" but "Where are you off to next?" It was a revelation. I realized that for years, I had been trying to force a square peg into a round hole, believing that my family was the only source of belonging I could ever have. But the world was vast, filled with diverse individuals, and there were people out there who understood my soul, who didn't need me to conform to their family picture. This newfound sense of community, built on shared values and genuine connection, was a balm to my long-aching heart. It was proof that I wasn't alone, that my path, though unconventional, was valid and full of promise. My world expanded, and with it my sense of self. With each new connection, the echoes of my past faded, replaced by the vibrant symphony of a life truly lived. As I embraced my new connections and continued to explore the world, both virtually and physically, I started to redefine what happiness and fulfillment meant to me. It wasn't about checking off boxes on a societal checklist, marriage, mortgage, minivan. It was about experiences, growth, and genuine connection. I booked a solo trip to Patagonia, something I'd always dreamed of but never dared to do. The vast, untamed landscapes mirrored the wild, untamed spirit I was finally allowing myself to unleash. Hiking through breathtaking mountains, feeling the biting wind on my face, and witnessing glaciers calve into turquoise lakes, I felt a profound sense of peace and accomplishment. There was no one to impress, no one to disappoint, just me and the raw beauty of the world. During that trip, I had a particularly profound moment while sitting by a glacial lake, the silence broken only by the occasional roar of ice shifting. I reflected on my family's family picture, the perfect suburban life, the traditional milestones. And then I looked at my own life, the freedom to travel, the intellectual stimulation of my work, the genuine friendships I was cultivating. My picture was different, yes, but it was just as valid, just as beautiful. It was my picture, painted with the vibrant hues of my own choices and passions. It wasn't a lesser life. It was simply a different one. I started to share more of my adventures on my personal blog and social media, not to seek validation, but to document my journey and connect with others who might be on a similar path. To my surprise, I received an outpouring of messages from people who resonated with my story, who felt the same pressures to conform, the same yearning for a different kind of life. Their stories echoed mine, proving that my experience wasn't unique, but a shared struggle for many. This online community became another source of strength and affirmation. It was a place where I could be authentically myself, without judgment or expectation. I wasn't just existing anymore, I was thriving. I was living a life that was rich in experiences, intellectually stimulating, and emotionally fulfilling. And most importantly, it was a life that was entirely my own, shaped by my desires and values, not by anyone else's family picture. This realization was a turning point. It wasn't about escaping my family's expectations anymore. It was about living a life so full and so true to myself that those expectations simply became irrelevant. The ripples of my self-discovery began to extend outwards, gently shifting the dynamics of even the most long-standing relationships. Months passed, and the initial tension with my family began to subside, replaced by a cautious, almost hesitant understanding. It wasn't a sudden reconciliation, but a slow, gradual shift. My mom still occasionally brought up the topic of marriage, but her tone was softer, less insistent. My dad, surprisingly, started asking me about my travels, genuinely interested in the places I'd seen and the experiences I'd had. My brothers, though still rooted in their traditional lives, seemed to accept that my path was different, and perhaps even valid. The biggest change came from an unexpected source, my niece Lily. During a rare family gathering, she sat beside me, sketching intently in her notebook. She was a quiet, artistic child, much like I had been. "Aunt Kenzie," she whispered, "is it true you get to work from anywhere in the world?" I nodded, and her eyes lit up. "That's so cool. My dad says I have to be a doctor, but I just want to draw." It was a small moment, but it hit me profoundly. My choice, my unconventional life, was already having an impact, showing the next generation that there were other possibilities, other ways to live a fulfilling life. I realized that while my family might never fully grasp my choices, they were beginning to see the joy and purpose I found in them. They might not understand why I chose to be single and childless, but they were starting to accept that I was happy. This wasn't about them finally agreeing with me. It was about them acknowledging my autonomy and respecting my right to define my own happiness. It was a fragile truce, but a truce nonetheless. And in its quiet way, it was a profound victory. I no longer felt the suffocating pressure, the constant need to explain or justify myself. I simply was, and they, in their own way, were starting to accept that. My boundaries were clear, and for the first time, they seemed to be respected. The family picture still existed, but I was no longer trying to squeeze myself into it. I was painting my own, vibrant and unique, and inviting them to admire it from afar, or, if they chose, to step inside and explore. The journey had been long and often painful, but it had ultimately led to a place of peace and genuine self-acceptance. Today, my life looks vastly different from the one my family envisioned for me. I'm still 38, still single, and still childless, but I'm living a life that is rich, meaningful, and authentically my own. My relationship with my family has found a new equilibrium. We may not always see eye to eye, but there's a newfound respect, a quiet acknowledgement of our differences. My mom still worries, but her worries are now tinged with a reluctant pride as I share tales from my travels or successes in my work. My dad, surprisingly, has become my biggest fan when it comes to my entrepreneurial ventures, often asking for updates and offering practical advice. And with Lily, I see a glimmer of hope, a future where individuality is celebrated, not stifled. The key lesson I've learned is this: your worth is not defined by anyone else's expectations or societal norms. True happiness comes from within, from embracing who you are, flaws and all, and forging a path that aligns with your deepest desires. It's about having the courage to write your own story, even if it doesn't fit the family picture or anyone else's idea of what your life should be. If you've ever felt like you don't fit in, like your choices are constantly scrutinized, know that you are not alone. Your journey is valid, and your unique path is worth celebrating. Don't dim your light to fit into someone else's shadow. Shine brightly, for yourself and for those who dare to dream differently. The most beautiful masterpieces are often the ones that break all the rules.